I am pleased to introduce Naria Santa-Lucia. Naria serves as the Executive Director of the Washington State Opportunity Scholarship, one of our workshop supporters, and a unique public-private partnership that's helping to build the next generation of scientists and engineers and technology specialists and mathematicians and healthcare professionals in Washington State's high-demand employment fields through scholarships and support for low and middle-income college students throughout Washington State. Since its inception in 2011, WSOS has provided scholarships and thousands of hours of support services to over 8,600 scholars and raised nearly $200 million in public-private support for scholarships. We'll be attending the annual Opportunity Talks breakfast hosted by WSOS tomorrow morning, which promises to be an excellent program. We're so very appreciative that you'll be hosting us. We thank WSOS for its support of bringing together this panel to explain how this public-private partnership came to be and the impact that it has had on Washington State. And Naria will introduce her panelists, but I'd like to make a special acknowledgement. We have Washington State Senator David Frock joining us as well. So thank you very much. Naria.
Do a little adjustment here, and I have the very distinct honor of also being the person standing between you and your beer and wine. So I promise to be on time, but we're going to get this panel done before 5:15. And again, with the breakfast, I don't know what happened. I drew the short straw here, but I get to speak to you at the end of the day, in the beginning, in the morning. So thank you for that opportunity. We're really looking forward to having all of you. Okay, so we got a little bit of summary about the Opportunity Scholarship already, but really an innovative, first of its kind in the nation, public-private partnership between industry and the state of Washington. I think John pointed out it's the only public-private partnership codified into law. So Rochelle from Washington Student Achievement Council, our higher ed entity, really partners with us. I saw folks from Washington STEM who are our program administrator. So there are many, many folks across the state, Boeing and Microsoft, we hear a lot about it, and of course our legislature that has worked together on this program. My goal during the WTIA panel, I think Caroline had mentioned all of the stats, like record number of skyscrapers, 100 out-of-town tech companies in our region, 740,000 jobs. We talked about different pathways and apprenticeships and the trades. This is really one piece of that whole journey, which is the higher ed portion. And with the boom of our region, the question of, do we continue to import talent from across the nation? That's great. We always know we'll import talent, and we welcome people into our great state. But also, what about those young people who grew up here, who went to high school here, and who now live in the boom? How do we make sure that they have the chance to access our innovation economy and really continue to thrive and pull their families out of poverty? So really, two birds with one stone, a win-win. So we have a quick video, but I just wanted to point out that there are a few cornerstone partners that really put this program together: Microsoft, the Boeing Company, Rubens Family Foundation, the Balmer family, and then taxpayers statewide. So anybody from Washington State, thank you. You are a donor. And we just have a quick little video we're going to show you, and I promise we're not going to repeat this video next year. And I say that because this is last year's video, so some of our stats have changed. So if that has happened, I apologize. We'll come out with the fresh details tomorrow. And if you could just hit it.
Physician shortages. We've had so much explosion of technology and translational science that we can do so much more for our patients. And so you need staff at the front lines to do that.
An unprepared and underskilled workforce holds us back. The time for Washington to invest in the future is now.
The only natural resource that fundamentally will guarantee economic success long into the future is people's minds and our ability to educate and prepare the next generation of students. That's what this program is all about.
In 2011, Washington State and our state's leading businesses took unprecedented action to counter our state's growing skills gap. The Washington State Opportunity Scholarship is the only public-private partnership in the nation investing in our future. It opens doors to higher education in the STEM fields for our state's low and middle income students.
STEM education is so important. Engineering and engineering-related degrees are really the future, and all students in our state need that opportunity. That's why this is important, not just to us, but to these students as well.
I thought, this is something that can really make a difference between going to college and not going to college.
Brittany is a first-generation college student studying physics and astronomy. She's working hard to launch her future.
Before I went into my freshman year of college, I was frantically trying to find scholarships. How am I going to pay for college because I'm not getting any financial help from my parents? It was really stressful, and I was worried, because UW is a great school, but it's also a really expensive school.
I didn't see myself going to college because of the financial needs, coming from poverty, coming from a poor family. Before I even think about going to college, we need to provide food for the family.
As a child, Yosef moved to Seattle from Algeria. Facing a life of poverty, he knew his only way out was through education. The Opportunity Scholarship supports his goal to pursue a degree in computer science.
The first thing I did, I went to my dad and showed him the letter. I didn't even read it to him. I was so overwhelming, I couldn't even speak. I was like, Dad, just look at this. He looked at it. He was so happy. I could see it in his eyes because he saw me going to college.
3/4 of Opportunity Scholarship graduates either work in their field or seek higher degrees. 90% stay in Washington State.
Because those are the high demand careers in our state where we have gaps in having enough prepared people. So to me, it's a very targeted, laser focused. These are the careers that we need very qualified applicants with college degrees and graduate degrees.
What was awesome about it was regenerating. So if you get it, you keep on getting it. I really like that. Also, I love that once you get into your major, it ups and you can get more reward, and it's awesome.
Students also receive access to local business leaders, professional development, and valuable industry exposure, helping them to persist academically, graduate on time, and launch professionally, prepared for the jobs of tomorrow.
Getting to network with all the different people who worked in Boeing and the different aerospace engineering companies around the area, that was awesome. Getting to meet people who are actually working in the industry.
It has helped me become more professional in the sense I get to see what real business people do, and it's helped me connect with business people and professional folks. So I've gotten an opportunity to see, what that's even like.
It was kind of like being validated. It's not just me feeling like I can do it. It's somebody else saying, I think you can do it as well.
Investing in our state's future workforce is an investment in our economy for years to come. For every dollar spent on STEM education, there's an estimated $7 saved in taxes and social spending.
What's amazing about the Washington State Opportunity Scholarship is that it is such a great investment in our future. When you know that every dollar invested returns sevenfold, it's a great business decision for our state to invest here because we're growing and we're building our own future.
They can get involved early in a student's career. They can bring those students in as interns. They're there in the applicant pool when they graduate. It would be just foolish for local employers not to participate in supporting this program.
I hope that 10 or 20 years from now, people will look back at what we did at Washington State and say, they got it right. This opportunity to bring the public and private sectors together, to bring state government and local companies and universities and ultimately students together. I hope people will look back and say, this made a difference for the people who were involved. This made a difference for the state as a whole.
Okay, thank you. we have, I think Jim mentioned this, 8,600 students that have been supported so far who are low and middle income, and they can receive up to $22,500 over the course of 5 years. And we're really excited that stat was 3/4, actually went up in our last postgraduate survey to 92% of our students who are employed or pursuing an advanced degree within 9 months of graduating. And really, one of the important stats is that 73% of the grads who are employed full-time are making over $40,000, and a majority are making between $40,000 and $70,000. So right away, you see that they can start breaking that cycle of intergenerational poverty. And another really great stat is that we are adding the diversity to this STEM field. Michael pointed that out. There are a lot of, currently 85% white male dominated field in tech, and we've seen majority women, majority students of color, as well as a majority who are first in their family ever to go to college who are accessing this award. And we have a big, hairy, audacious goal of awarding 16,000 students by 2025. So that's kind of us in a nutshell. And a true public-private partnership, meaning $1 in and matched by the state, which equals $2. And we're very strategic with the use of our dollars, so we actually walk back to look at what are the high-demand fields that we currently have a talent gap in Washington State for. And then, like Brittany mentioned in the video, we actually increase the award amount so that when you continue into your major, you get a bump in your award. And this is really just a slide about, it's not just about the money. So that's how we get our students' attention and in the door. What really happens between those first through 5 years when we're funding the students, we think is where the magic is. We really are working to meet the students where they are, getting them industry connections, mentorship opportunities, connections with, internship and career placement, and also very importantly, case management, because a lot of the students don't have anyone in their family who's ever gone to college. So, today's panel, with a straight ass, I'm not sure what happened there, but today's panelist, really excited to welcome Jane Broom from Microsoft Philanthropy, Senator David Frost, Jane Park, CEO of Julep and one of our board members, and then Madi Ramadan, who is a WSOS alum, and they're going to share a little bit about their connection and about their involvement and their opinions on the Opportunity Scholarship. So, I'm going to start with Jane, who was there really from the beginning of the program.
Well, he was.
Well, this is from the beginning.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, deal.
And Jane, you've really been a critical piece of WSOS since its inception. You and Microsoft, of course, have really
Yes.
a lot of the funding investment, but also the strategic planning behind the scholarship. So I'm wondering if you could just walk us through how the scholarship came to be, kind of what were the ups and the downs, any challenges, being honest and open, and the benefit of hindsight, what did you maybe recommend to do differently as well?
That's a lot. That's a lot to say. So I will try. This has been a long journey for sure. And as someone who's been involved in a lot of different public-private partnerships, this has been probably one of the more challenging ones, but also one of the most rewarding ones because of the output that you just saw. How this whole thing came to be, and you'll probably correct me if I mess up some of this history, but essentially what happened is then Governor Daugaard brought together a task force that the president of Microsoft, Brad Smith, was asked to lead. And it was to address this higher education funding crisis situation, whatever you want to call it, here in Washington State. And that was in, gosh, I think that task force was started in 2010. And a lot of different things were covered in that task force, but one of the outputs of that task force was this notion that tuition at Washington State universities and colleges would increase. And one of the things that was brought to their attention with the data and the profiles of students and so forth, is there was this gap of students sort of in the low and middle income family range that would be most impacted was tuition increase. There were opportunities for people from with the state need grant and other scholarships and things like that. There were opportunities for them, but this low and middle income family would really take the hit the most. And so this task force looked at the idea of, gosh, what can we do there? How can we possibly do something very specific to support that group of people? But then how do we also look at what the state really needs? And we've all heard ad nauseum today, the skills gap, and we've seen all those stats about where we are as a state. We're not completely unique, but we are definitely on the high end of that skills gap. And when it comes to equity of opportunity, we have a lot of work to do as a state. And so that notion really, those ideas came together that ultimately created the Opportunity Scholarship. And this notion of how can the state and the private sector work together to pool funds and incentivize students from low and middle income families to actually go and pursue the jobs that are growing with intensity here in the state of Washington. And that's the core idea. Microsoft and Boeing kicked it off with each making $25 million donations, and the legislature had created this matching opportunity. It's codified, so the state of Washington would match dollar for dollar every dollar that came in. So kind of right off the bat, we had a decent amount of money. We were kind of off to the races. Now this is where I am getting a puppy tomorrow. So I'm very focused on the puppy, and the analogy of the puppy is what I'm going to be using, because the first phase of this Opportunity Scholarship Program is just like a puppy. It's so bright and shiny and happy, and yay, we got the tools, and we got the chew toys, and the wee pads, and the this and the that. We got all this stuff. It's going to be perfect. And then comes the second phase of buyer's remorse, and where can I return this puppy? And wow, we didn't get the right tools, and this is a little bit harder than we thought, and people are not following the right roles and responsibilities. And that was a good 2 or 3 years of this initial phase of the public-private partnership. But like you do with all family members, and I consider puppies family members, is you stick with it and you work together and you listen to each other and you see each other and you learn to adapt as a family and you create something that is magical. And that is what is going to happen with my puppy, by the way. We're going to hit that magical phase in about a month, as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, I joke about that, but it truly is an example of, sometimes to take on a big, hairy problem you gotta go in with very, very strong leadership and very, very, let's just say, a ton of patience and a ton of just going in with this knowledge that it's going to be tough, and we're doing things in different ways, and everybody has to learn from each other. But in the end, when you stick with it, you can actually get some pretty incredible results. So I'll stop there, and I'm sure we'll talk more.
It reminds me of my favorite quote, that if you go alone, you get there faster, but if you go together, you can go further. And I would definitely say as a testament that going together with, CEOs that are like, quick, where is the solution? We're not getting there fast enough. With this state that has, a lot of constituents to worry about, it can be challenging, but those two combined together, I think magic can happen and we can really go further. So, to that point, Senator Brock, you've been a huge champion for the Opportunity Scholarship, and I would say in general, I've heard from you and from others that has a lot of bipartisan support, and support even from gubernatorial administration to administration. Governor Inslee has also been a huge champion and picked up the mantle from Governor Gregoire. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to that. Why do you think that it has garnered that support?
Well, I think that when we passed this bill back in 2011, it started, Jane did a great job of sort of explaining the origins, and I think the context was really important because it kind of gets lost because we've done some different things in Washington with our tuition policy. We gyrated really high during the recession for a variety of reasons, which are complicated to go into at the today. But in the last few years, we've taken our tuition down, which I think has been a good public policy for our state overall. But we were really looking at that time for a way to basically not make the hit so hard on those, as Jane was saying, in the low income. But also, actually, what's interesting about this scholarship is it reaches into to 125% of the family income. I mean, if you're in this state and you're below, oh, I'm sorry, I'll be a little closer there. Oh, now can you hear me? I'm so sorry. Do you want me to start over? No, I won't start over. What kind of politician cannot turn on a microphone? That's very odd. I managed to do that. Anyway, what I was going to say is that it goes up to 125% of poverty, of median family income. And of course, financial aid in the state, both for our state E grant, which is a very great program, one of the best in the country, and Pell Grants are at about 60%. So the intention here was to reach those in the lower income, and I would say largely the scholarship still reaches those kids. It reaches up into those quintiles above that to a degree, but that was part of the value proposition for many of those who were concerned not only about kids who were not poor enough to get Pels and state aid grants, but are going to be going to massive amounts of debt, but also those who were not wealthy enough, their families didn't have enough money where they were not going to be burdened, and we're going to be taking on loads and loads of debt, which is still a problem. And this was sort of at the beginning of the discussion that we've been having the last few years over college debt, affordability, college for all, those kinds of things. So I think at the time that we considered this proposition, that was a big part of it. And then of course, what was interesting about this, the original proposal from Governor Daugaard's Blue Ribbon Task Force, and I am now my eighth year in government, and I've decided that everything bad and good in government starts with a Blue Ribbon Task Force. Whatever happens, it was somebody's good idea at one point, and how it pans out, we don't know. But the Blue Ribbon panel basically wanted us to set up a foundation, basically, an endowment. And that really wasn't going to fly politically, because so we had kind of those on the more conservative side who said, look, we got to get into the middle, make sure we get into the middle class, and you've got those sort of on the more progressive side saying, we don't want to take away money from those who are at the lower end, and that was how it was partly viewed. And that continues to be a problem, an issue that we have to deal with politically is, well, you're putting this money into this particular scholarship program for a particular need. Why shouldn't we put that money more broadly into our state need grant, which is underfunded? That's a legitimate public policy question that we have to deal with. And I think what we try to do is bridge the gap and say this is for a specific purpose, for a workforce need that we all talk about, but haven't really taken any steps to address. And that was sort of the genius, I think, behind the bill when we were able to get through it. At the very beginning, we got it through with almost no opposition. So we had broad support in both parties, which was very interesting at the time, and we've been able to maintain that. There was definitely a question in the last couple of budget cycles is would the state actually come and make its contribution? And I think what's really helped there is that the scholarship, and if you're from a state that may be considering looking at something like this, it's really important to have a couple of, it's like a real estate development. You got to have a couple of anchor tenants, and then you got to bring in everybody else around. And the scholarship has done a fantastic job of raising additional money beyond just Boeing and Microsoft, who were the initial two founders. And I think that's also broadened its support. It shows that it has broader support politically, and it's serving a really important need. And so we'll talk about some additional things we're going to do, I hope, next year with the scholarship. But those were two things that I think were really important in founding and getting this up and going.
That's great, and I think it also helped probably that we actually have students hailing from every county and every legislative district in our state. So there was one county, Garfield County, that I think has one elementary, middle, and high school combined. And we physically went there, and we were like, we really want to have every county represented. And they had students apply, and last year we had 3 scholars, I think, out of a class of like 40 or something. So, you know, I think those students are really going to change their community, so we're really excited about that. Great, thank you. Jane, so from the board perspective and as a volunteer to the organization that has spent a lot of time, talent, and treasure on this effort, maybe can you speak a little bit about what it's meant for you? And you also mentioned that you were the star of the video there. You mentioned the hand-to-hand combat. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that as well.
It's interesting because I first found out about this organization from the business perspective, and I did find very compelling. I think one of the things that the Washington State Opportunity Scholarship as an organization has done really well is combine data and research. So the number that obviously stuck with me is that for every dollar invested, you get $7 back. So if you can really sort of, and that's a sound bite here because we don't have time to get you through the 200 pages of analysis that got us through that. So it was super convincing that that this is a good investment. So it did start off with working with some consultants who were super smart and where we had data to found the whole idea. So I kind of approached from that perspective. What's kept me really active and more active is that it's the students and the stories. So I do think that sounds kind of very basic, but there's so many different little aspects to making unique and innovative partnership like this successful. And I'm an entrepreneur, I started a company, so that it's very similar to that for me. And certainly I connect to the student stories because I myself was an immigrant. I didn't speak English when I first actually immigrated to Canada. And my parents had a 7-Eleven store, so knowing what it's like to go to college and not have anybody who knows what that's like, to never have walked into an office building, much less a hotel lobby like this until you were an adult. It's a very different kind of experience that you bring. And hearing the stories of the students and how they're interwoven. So even in developing programs, I think Naria has done a fantastic job of really bringing in students at every level, whether it's planning and brainstorming sessions or every board meeting, every fundraising meeting, making sure that you're inclusive, it's a huge organizational effort to really get somebody from every county. It's kind of crazy to kind of set that as a goal and to actually fulfill it. So thinking through how you want this to be a connection point and the effort that it takes. It is all personnel and people too, finding a fantastic executive director and having people who, you know, getting them to be invested beyond just lending their names, but actually sort of doing a ton of work. And Brad Smith, who has actually, you know, completely amazed for somebody who is president of, you know, one of the largest global companies, to have the detail he does from Lasso. Like he opens up his Surface and there's OneNotes and there's just tons of information and a grasp of the details that is really powerful. So I think we all work, we care about this project, and it, for me, in some ways started from a self-interest of it is really hard to hire engineers. I'm a beauty company, but we have an e-commerce aspect, so we're really trying to recruit people away from Microsoft, from Amazon, from Google, Hulu, all of those guys here in Seattle. And so, you know, the limited labor pool makes it hard and challenging. And I see so much more opportunity for growth. And this is a very vibrant startup community. And the lack of labor is a key constraint to companies that want to grow in this region. So I think that's you know, it'll be interesting to see where Amazon lands its second headquarters city, right? And I think labor pool will be a huge part of it. How much is the state, is the economy doing to support the labor that companies need to be able to grow to the next level.
Thank you. And one thing that you said is really key as far as the student involvement. I think it was, the scholarship actually started at a lower amount. It was at 17,000 total. And it was really the students that spoke to the board and said, hey, listen, this is actually not enough for even my science, my engineering textbook for 1 year. So we were able to, because of that feedback, quickly pivot, and I guess it is another great example of that public-private partnership and also listening to students. So thank you, Jane. Madi. So Madi, we're so happy to have him here. Madi is our alum, and he's actually tomorrow, for those of you who come to the breakfast, and I really encourage you, not just because it's a free breakfast, but to come because you will have at your tables a scholar who is currently a student. We really commit to having a scholar at every table because it's really a networking opportunity for them as well, and you'll get to hear their stories. But we always have a headline speaker, and Madi was our first headline speaker 2 years ago, and he's really brave to do that. We've invited him back because he's actually out of the state right now. He's going to come back and work in Washington State for sure.
He already did.
But
he said it in public now.
Tweet it. So Madi, I wonder if you could just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what the scholarship meant for you and also what you're up to right now.
Hello, everyone. Oh, there we go. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Really honored. And my name is Mehdi Ramadan. I wanted to give you a little bit of background, share some details about my story, going from, some of my earliest memories here in the United States up to where I am right now. And at 2 years old, my family immigrated to the United States from my home country of Lebanon due to war. And some of my earliest memories actually in the United States were my parents met this speech therapist. Her name was Laura Snow. And she came over to our house a couple of times because she wanted to learn Arabic. And in exchange, she'd teach my parents English. And that's how the relationship started. But then she started noticing that, she was at that time pursuing her doctorate in speech pathology. And so she used to bring her, magazines and books on the brain and language. And she noticed that, at that time I was 3-4 years old, I would pick them up and be super interested and, run into her lap and, ask her to read to me about the, even though at that time I didn't understand, but I still remember that, I was really, just curious to see, oh, what are these books, I haven't, before my parents, didn't own a lot of books, so the relationship developed into her seeing, oh, there's, Mehdi's really curious, is interested in science. And so I remember, as I got older and older, she started suggesting to my parents, like, oh, we need to, start planning so that when Mehdi, finishes high school, he could go to college, and, pursue his interest in science. And I remember, her and my parents would get into arguments all the time because, from my parents' perspectives, how are we going to pay for college for him, And so kind of growing up, it made it seem that, college for me is a dream, and that this is a burden on my family and my parents because of their financial situation, and I didn't want to put that burden on them and to stress them out. So, college was always for me like, oh yeah, sure, like, one day maybe, as a dream, even though, I had like a passion for neuroscience ever since I was like a young kid. And so fast forward, I went through middle school, high school, I get to, the end of my junior year, my high school teacher is talking to me about what are you gonna do next after high school. I'm like, I don't know, would it make sense to maybe, go get, maybe straight into the workforce so I can support my family. College is too expensive, I don't want to burden them, I don't want to stress them out with loans or any of this. One of the first scholarships she actually, told me about was the Washington State Opportunity Scholarship. My parents couldn't tell me that because my parents, never went to college. They don't even know what scholarships are. They didn't know that there was like, based on your merit or financial need, you could get, support, financial support. And so at that moment, I was like, okay, so maybe, college is not, a dream, maybe it could be a reality for me. So, I went ahead, I applied for the Washington State Opportunity Scholarship, applied to UW, and I got accepted into UW and got the scholarship. And so, that for me was, I could go to my dad and, be like, hey, like, I actually, got into this school, I got financial support, I can do this. People believe in me, I believe in myself, I want to go to college. And so he was like, son, like, I'm really proud of you, go ahead. So I went into UW and, like, the money is important, obviously, from the scholarship, so that, instead of loaning or working, how many hours a week that you need to work to pay tuition, I could, spend that time in my research lab and got research experience. I could go and to study groups, I didn't have to, some of my other friends, had to work, 5 days a week to pay for their tuition sometimes, And so I felt really lucky because not only could I get the education that I wanted, I also had that freedom that I wanted to, pursue research positions that I wanted. And as important as the money is, what's even more important for me was, the support that the scholarship gave me and, the events that they held. I always wanted to work at the Allen Institute for Brain Science. I'm sure you guys know it's like big neuroscience institute. And, as a neuroscientist, this was like my dream. I wanted to intern there. And actually, Teresa told me about this one event that they had, and she's like, oh, I think we have a representative from the Allen Institute at this event. So if you want, you could come and I'll introduce you. I'm a little bit shy, so she knew me, she knew how I am. Like, I'll take you, don't be shy, like, I'll introduce you to her. So I ended up going to that event, talked to the representative, and she told me, everything about what the Allen Institute did. She told me, what are you interested in? Oh, maybe you could like look at these positions, And she really motivated me, and I did end up applying to the Allen Institute, getting that internship for the summer, and then I was so into the research that I did that I asked if I could stay for that, until I graduate from undergrad, just working part-time at the Allen Institute. And my mentor said, of course. So my last year of undergrad, I studied at UW and part-time worked at the Allen Institute. This is all because of the networking that the scholarship provided for me. And there's various other examples like, giving my talk at the WSOS breakfast. And it really feels like if I can share my story, kind of verifies what I'm doing, and all the hard work that you're putting in. And so for me, that's the most important part, was the support that they gave me and the motivation that, you have this community, right, of people, not only in the scholarship, you guys are here, right, so, I consider you, I got to meet great people who inspired me just like you, and for me, that was the most important aspect of this scholarship. And so in summary, I would say that the meaning of this scholarship to me is freedom, because it gave me the freedom to study what I wanted, which is neuroscience, and it gave me the freedom, that I can pursue this, and that doesn't mean that I have to burden my family, stress them out, or that means that I have to miss out on opportunities that I also wanted to pursue outside of school. And so that's what the scholarship means to me.
But tell them what you're doing right now.
Oh, and so right now, I'm continuing my education. I decided to continue it. So right now, I'm pursuing my PhD at MIT, and in the Department of Brain and Cognitive Sciences. And so,
thank you for that, Madi, and thank you for being an amazing representative. Like Jane said, our best asset are our scholars and their stories. And I just think about all of those other students across the state who we could give that opportunity for. There are these great jobs. Let's make sure that our Washington students and
potentially students across your states who could be prepared and launched into those careers. So, let's see, I'm really mindful of not keeping you from the beer and wine. I wonder if we could just go down the line real quick once, or popcorn, however you like. And there are representatives from other states here in the room, so if you could share a little bit about if they were interested in replicating a program like WSOS, kind of what advice would you give to them? Let's start with Jane.
I think it's about the personnel, so find a fantastic executive director. And you know, I worked for a while at Starbucks helping start new companies, and I remember the other Howard, not Howard Schultz, but Howard Behar said that retail is detail. And I actually think that scholarships are detail, that it's about the detail of the students. There are a lot of decisions to be made, and I think what this group has done really well is to not take any existing formula, to start with each question and approach it to say what can we do differently? What can we do better? How do we, you know, there's so much complexity in anything that has to do with education, right? Even sort of thinking about how we support the students in a way that isn't duplicative of existing services, but is sort of going to strengthen. We're looking for opportunities where, actually, I think that that slide was funny, the 1 + 1 = 2. I think this scholarship is about trying to make 1 + 1 = more than 2. So how do you make sort of more than what you have by doing something differently and creatively, whether it's thinking about how to support upperclassmen, how do you really address retention. There are a lot of decisions, and I think taking it collaboratively, listening to students, getting somebody involved who can help you with data and to model out what the impact of the actions can be. But I think the public-private partnership has been terrific. It really is a unique way to have conversations where it's super collaborative. I think there's a lot of good questions from board members. I say that as a board member, so maybe that's self-serving. But the intent is very collaborative, and starting from scratch is sort of trying to take new approaches to existing problems while also listening and collaborating with existing institutions. So it's not just saying, hey, this is the way that we thought of it for the first time ever. All of the different activities that we've engaged in have had lots of sessions leading up to it that work with existing organizations, with institutions, with higher education institutions, and a lot of the support institutions that wrap around those.
Thank you. Senator Frock, what advice would you have?
Well, I think what I would say is, from the public's standpoint, to try to build support for this, and you're going to have to build support among policymakers and people who have control over the budget strings, to have the public component to this, to get people to buy in. I think it's really important to make sure you can bring stories, maybe from our state or from other people, like Monty's, because one thing I've sort of realized in all the work that I've done in higher education in the last few years is that for coming into the legislature 8 years ago, I came from the middle class. We weren't rich, but certainly a middle class background where there was a college going expectation. And I think sometimes it's hard for people to conceptualize how hard it is for students who don't come from maybe first generation or from a poor background or an immigrant background, where they're struggling, and just like Monty relayed, the idea of you don't know how to apply for a scholarship, you don't know how you're going to do these things. And I think conveying those stories about what it means to that person if you're going to give them a little bit of help or a leg up is really important to figuring out how to build political support to invest in all of these programs. And I think about this program, I think about another one that I'm very supportive of called the Mesa Program, which some of you may know. And I hear this over and over and over again, when you talk to students who are in the sciences, and I was, of course, not a scientist. I was a liberal arts history, poli-sci guy, so here I am. I can't do anything except talk. That said, for those who are coming into those really much more challenging fields that were really technical, hard sciences and computer science, to have people in there who they can look to and have those supports in a lot of different ways, both in peers and also from the faculty or from other supports that groups like this provide, is just so critical, and it really makes a difference. I hear that over and over and over again. So I think if you can relay that in sort of a soft basis to those who have to put the money in of why this is so important to have something specialized like this, I think it will make a big difference.
Jane?
I agree with everything that's been said. I think the thing that I would emphasize is somehow, some way, whatever you're doing, put students at the center. And there is tremendous freedom from, the shackles that we all hold, or the past rules or histories or turf or whatever, when you just think about what is best for students. You are allowed to let go of some of that stuff, and we've had to. And it's funny, it's like when we've sort of been like in the messier time, the get rid of the puppy part, when we've been in that phase, honestly, it's when you've lost sight of the student. And you get focused on your own stuff. And so for us, that's been the greatest lesson. And then hiring people and bringing people into the process who, that's how they make decisions. And then finding somebody like Naria is really important too. So I would add that.
I'm paying all these folks. Okay, thank you. Madi, any advice?
I would say, along the lines of what I said, the money is important, but I think the more important thing is to provide that one-on-one support. Because a lot of the students like me, for example, who grew up with parents who never went to college, if I had a question about, what does a resume look like? How do I start on a resume? Or how do I apply for scholarships? Or, any of these types of questions, or, how to dress up for an interview. I honestly couldn't go to my dad or mom and ask them because they wouldn't know, and so just to have that person, for example, in the scholarship, that you could reach out to and have that mentor of, hey, like, could you look over my, personal statement and tell me if I'm hitting all the good, the points that they're looking for. What should I, even like typing up an email to ask for a letter of recommendation, what should I say? How should I phrase this? Things like that, just really simple things, subtle things that make a difference, for students like us. I think that's where the most impact could be had. So I think, having that support system of, having mentorship is very important, and I think events like this is really important because, when I come to events like this and network and meet all of you, I get a better idea of where my education or research could be applied in this community. When I meet, both private and public, institutions and people that represent both, I could really see okay, so, what I'm studying is not just limited to this textbook. I see myself maybe doing this in this company, there's a need for this, and I can, there's someone there that actually, is interested in what I do and what I study, and so this is extra motivation for you that, okay, it's not just, learning from a textbook, it's actually I'm going to be working on real world problems that exist and that need solutions, and companies that need, public institutions that need students like me to come and solve these problems. And so it helps me as a student also tailor, my education and research and motivate me further because, sometimes staring down at a textbook for a couple hours, some nights you need more than that. So it's great motivation. So that's what I would say.
Did you want to chime in there? Okay. So, questions?
Just nodding in agreement.
Any questions from the audience?
So Madi mentioned his internship opportunity and how he came about that through his networking associated with the scholarships. But I'm wondering if there are any more formal mechanisms to provide students with work-based learning opportunities and internships during the course of the time that they're one of the scholars.
So actually the board just recently approved a new growth options model for the scholarship, and we actually did a lot of best practices research and then brought in student voices as well. And the slide that I had up there really is about meeting scholars where they are, so kind of a continuum of support that's differentiated. So for our first and second year students, we're actually going to have our upper class WSOS scholars receive a paid internship opportunity to mentor them. So every WSOS first and second year will have a mentor. Then when you go over into the part where you're in your major, the third and fourth and fifth year students will actually work one-on-one with program officers all around placement. So we certainly don't think we can ever be an internship placement service. That would take a lot of work and a lot of funds. But brokering internships, kind of having a caseload that's manageable, if you actually have a relationship with your scholar and then place them with internships. And then we have a very robust industry mentorship model as well. So our upperclassmen will also receive a mentor from the community through a program called Skills That Shine that was developed by Boston Consulting Group for us, all around those things that Monty talked about. How do you write a letter asking for a letter? How do you write an email asking for a letter of recommendation? What do I do on my first 90 days on the job? Professional, how do I dress for a tech interview versus a Goldman Sachs interview? I mean, all these things that may be easier once you're in the workplace, you can kind of figure out. We want to provide that to our students so that they do have that leg up, so that when they're competing for these jobs, they're going to be, top of mind.
One other thing I'd add that Nari and her staff do so well is they literally go out to all the companies and just scour the websites and find the internships and the different things, and then they market those things like crazy to these scholars, so that it's great, because a lot of these kids don't know that, summer at Microsoft out on the Redmond campus, we have 3,500 interns every summer. And so making sure that Washington kids know that these opportunities exist is really great, and that's something that Nari and her staff really do. I mean, Monty, you all know the staff at Opportunity Scholarship. I mean, it's not like a fake thing. It's not like some email person on the other end. They are real relationships, and that's the other thing that this program does so well, is that it really invests in the human-to-human relationship building.
And one of the things I would really have to say is onboarding scholars. So in the puppy phase, I will have to say we did not do a great job of onboarding our students, meaning they would get the award, and I got an award once from Rotary when I was in high school. I'm like, I don't know who Rotary is. Now I know. I didn't know at the time. And I never heard from them again. And so that's what students think when they think scholarship, you're just going to give me some cash. But we're like, no. This is an investment in your future, and it's been made for you by companies, and guess what, by the state. Like, taxpayers actually invested in you. And so if you're going to accept this award, there are certain points along your roadmap for your college career that you really need to hit, and we will walk alongside you and make sure that you get there. But that onboarding process is really, really important. We're really focusing on it. And it is these are really tough degrees. And I know that in your states too, probably the talent shortfall isn't in attorneys like me or former attorneys or liberal arts majors. They are in these engineering degrees, ECS, and I think Senator Frock mentioned it, that they're really tough and they're really challenging. And for us to just say, hey, you're a first generation low income student, you fit all of our demographics, and now go succeed, because you can't, it's just not really going to happen. And so if you do this laser focus, walk back with it, which I think that's why we have the 92% placement rate. I mean, those things are all great, but behind all of that needs to be a lot of support. So I guess I answered the question I posed to you guys as far as what advice.
I won't pick on Jane, no, but for anybody, what, the job growth in Washington and California is phenomenal, but it's not in every other state. So what advice do you have, I'll look to you, Senator, on retention to make sure that, okay, you're doing all these great things, educating these kids and make sure they stay in their states and don't way to Washington?
So that's a really, first of all, it's a great question, and I will tell you that was the one thing, the one area that I pointed out in my initial remarks about, could this money be better applied going straight into our financial aid program? The second, that was a huge issue. The second sort of question was, well, we're going to give these sort of advanced scholarships and more aggressive scholarships out to other individuals with higher amounts. Although actually that wasn't initially how it started. It was broadened later. But in any event, will they actually stay here? Will Monty, who goes to MIT, who does incredible work, will he end up coming here? Well, obviously you can't know that for sure. We don't know. But the data so far has been good. I think it's a question of trying to develop those ties with the major employers in the states that you do have, and whatever sectors they might be in, and really being intentional and aggressive and going out and trying to get them to partner with you, whatever their financial contribution, to say, look, we're investing in a workforce. I mean, every state, no matter what the dynamics of their economy needs, knowledge workers and workforce, workforce developed in a way that is going to meet the needs of that particular industry or their state, and you've just got to find a way to say to them, look, we're investing in them, you need to come here, and we want you to do that. So if the employers buy in, I think that will help, particularly, in our case with Microsoft and Boeing, but also with others, that will help. But I can't say for sure that the experience in Idaho or North Dakota would be the same, but of course I don't know what the dynamics are in your particular states and what industries are in need. I'm certain that there are.
If I could just jump in, I think that the research across the board about if you hire people who are from your state, they're more likely to stay. If you import talent, they're more likely within 2 years to move on back home. For family reasons or whatever, it may be. So I think that this has been, I'm not sure, we haven't actually tested this, so we don't know if it's a driver of students deciding to stay, but we keep on hovering at between 84 and 92% of our students every year who graduate actually stay in the state. And I really think that is because these are high school students. And the other key piece is you can only go to college in Washington State. So you can't, go to another state like UCLA or something. You have to go to one of the Washington schools. So you already have Washington high school grad, Washington college, so the chances are high, and then you expose them to Washington industry positions. I think that kind of is a good recipe of keeping the students here.
Yeah, I mean, just to follow up on that, really, if you think about it, if your state does have any kind of financial aid program, without this intentionality that this program has, there's no guarantee anyway. So it's not really a worse proposition to invest in something like this, I think.
Just to build on one idea here, I don't know where everybody in this room is in terms of sort of the taking on the complexity of actually putting together something like this. From where I sit, a baby step that I think could be really interesting, out of all the different things that we talked about, because somebody mentioned internships, right? And scholarships and internships take a lot of effort to get going. Internships, when you ask a company for an internship, unless they're huge like Microsoft, the effort it takes to get that together. I mean, when Ari asked me, I was like, I'll do anything for you, don't ask me that, because I have taken tons of interns and you feel guilty if you don't use them the right way or whatever, and that's what a lot of business leaders feel when that's the specific ask. But one thing that we talked about as we were developing the support structure ideas for year 3 and 4 and how to really expand in the school sort of retention so that people don't drop out of the program, but is what can you do with local businesses that are sort of more lighter touch experiences that help the kids. So could you, do hackathons over a weekend that give students an experience, have interactions with the community, but aren't as big a bite as as putting together an entire scholarship or finding, sort of internships at scale, right? So one of the most interesting ideas that I've heard as we've figured out what next steps are for the scholarship is how do you scale interactions that can be impactful to the students. And one of those things is this idea of organizing local hackathon type experiences. It could be public policy, problems. It could be lots of different, it doesn't have to be computer software. But what can you do to get business leaders kind of interacting with these kids and having them have a sense of, oh wow, my ideas matter, and just sharing stories of failure, right? I think when I talk to the students, one of the things that they're really interested in is like the fact that, hey, I didn't get funding from every VC firm I applied to or I connected with. Just these stories of kids who are applying to majors, they didn't even know they had to apply in their second and third years, and then that if you don't get in, they don't know that lots of kids don't get in, that it often takes a couple of times to apply. There's some basics around how to stick with a program throughout your 4 years that a lot of these kids don't have familiarity with. So breaking it down a little bit, making it seem like, oh, I'm somebody who could work in this office building is, I think, a super, I often say, again, in terms of sort of the entrepreneurship piece, it's like, we're not going to solve world hunger today, but let's get some snacks on the table. And so these are, at least, thought it might be helpful to share some snacks on the table ideas.
I just had a couple of quick questions. One is the current level of funding in the program. Second, the high demand fields of study that you're actually funding, and whether you fund at the 2-year, 4-year, and master's levels. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so really quickly, we are on track to fund the $16,000 by 2025, and we also have an endowment fund of about $25 million that we expect to grow if the market stays as it is. Your other question was about
the high demand fields that you do fund.
Yeah, so we look every year at the ERDC data, and we also look at, walk back with the list from the Student Achievement Council to see what are the high demand degrees that are offered in our state. And we've currently found about 150 of them, and more come online, like applied BAs especially, and we will always add those to the list. And so we look at that every year. And then students can start in a 2-year community technical college or program, but they need to intend to finish in a 4-year degree program. We are also in the process of working through the Washington State Legislature to expand the program to professional technical degrees. So those are sub-baccalaureate degrees that would terminate in something less than a 4-year degree. A lot of the things that we talked about this morning or earlier this afternoon. So. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. I wanted to say 3 things that I heard from this panel, like a little summary. That puppies are family. Stick with them. Magic will happen at phase 3. Okay. And everything. What is it? Everything bad and good happens from. Oh, everything good and bad starts from a blue ribbon panel. That was amazing. And the last takeaway from me was really about we need to give our young people and everyone in our state freedom to pursue their dreams. Thank you.